Hi, I'm Embers. I use he, him.
I'm Jerika. I use she, her.
And I'm Jay, your DM. I use he, him, and this is Insight Check, where we delve into the dungeon of your bad decisions and retrieve the treasure of wisdom. And today we have a very special guest. Very proud to present, a longtime friend of mine. We were talking about this the other day. Like, we actually have interacted quite a few times, just sort of tertiary interactions, and then we played D&D together once. Zee Bashew.
Hello.
Acclaimed internet animator.
We met during the fledgling months of the Shadow Council, like right at the beginning.
Yeah,
there.
the C team.
Yeah. I can't remember. I was doing like animations of the C team at the time as a fan, and you were one of the people on Twitter that like responded one day when I was like, I actually think there are enough people on Twitter that follow my account now that I can just play D&D if I want to. And so I would just send out invites for a game in 1 hour, and then we would be playing.
It was really jazz, too, because you would literally just be like, okay, I'm free right now. I want to play in an hour. Anybody who's interested, send below. And then you would send Discord links, and we would just join in and play for a bit.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Just make a level 2 character real fast. I was like, okay. And then just plug through.
Yeah. They were super, super fast characters. I think all I provided you guys with icons to represent you, and then you like reverse engineered what the character would be.
But yeah, so Z, my first exposure to you was those animations that you made on C Team, which was really crazy. Like, that work schedule was insane.
It was pretty nuts.
You were releasing one like every week or week and a half. It was intense.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was easy at first, but then they kept getting more elaborate, which I think happens to anybody who does creative stuff like on a schedule. You just, as you get more adept, you just screw yourself and make stuff harder and harder and harder.
Well, it's like you want that challenge. You want to kind of try new things. I think a person who doesn't ever try something different each week, a person who just kind of does the same thing over and over, is going to get burnt down on a project.
Yeah, it's a two-edged sword.
So how long have you been playing Dungeons and Dragons? Where did that start?
Well, I didn't initially play Dungeons and Dragons. It's a difficult thing to explain to people that I started by playing homebrew tabletop games. I started going to a card shop, and I was playing Legend of the Five Rings right when it was actually popular, you know what I mean, for a little while.
Oh, yeah. Back when they were doing tournaments and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And anyway, so through that, I got a job with somebody working for like carnies, doing like weird carnival work. And this dude would talk about role-playing games every morning on our way to the fairgrounds. And I didn't understand what aspect a game like that could take. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't, when somebody tells you a D&D story for the first time, you're like, what the fuck does this game look like?
Yeah, you would definitely be curious about the engines of a game that could create sort of random wild elements like that.
Exactly, yeah. So when another person at the card shop was going to host a 7th Sea game, a few weeks later, I was in, and I played that with him. I ruined the game because I was young. And I didn't understand that I couldn't just kill everybody and steal everything and say crazy shit.
I think the murder hobo start is pretty common.
Oh, yeah, totally. Well, because, a lot of us started out on video games, right? And in a video game, everybody is either just like a hollow shell or an enemy.
Yeah, and sometimes the hollow shells are filled with gold and trinkets.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Like a Baldur's Gate where you kill NPCs or Skyrim where you rob random NPCs.
Yeah, they're just walking bags of gold and items. Armed with that knowledge, I went home and I tried to make a role-playing game from scratch.
Really?
Wow. All right.
And my friends and I were like, look, DMs are stupid, right? Like, it's a dumb idea to have a coach. Everybody wants to play. So we tried to make a DM-free system. The way that we were doing it was basically as a PvP thing.
Oh, like a tournament.
It was like a tournament game.
#DSports.
Yeah, exactly. It was called Monkey, and it was all these like weird like super intelligent apes, and you would slide through rules and they would get voted on. And then if everybody else agreed that sounded balanced, they'd be like a tournament ready character. But
Oh, okay.
well, I'd been playing Legend of the Five Rings for years, so I knew how to loophole stuff. And so I was basically just a complete asshole. Do you know what I mean? Like, I would come up with these things where it's like, I would go like, okay, so this character can move to a shadow within 30 feet as an action. And they have the lowest damage output of any character in the game. But every time they hit another character, they gain an additional +1 or whatever. Right? Like things that isolated sounded totally harmless, but then I would unleash them.
You'd be warping around the shadows, doing single hits on enemies, gaining power every turn, and then becoming unstoppable.
Yeah, exactly. And it was and what ended up happening is my friends were like, "This sucks. Playing these games with you sucks, and we're not going to do it anymore." And so it was a real uphill battle for me to
Some constructive feedback.
Yeah. No, I mean, but those were specifically not my system heavy friends, right? Like I've got a buddy, Elliot, who I can't play card games with. Like he's so much smarter than I am in that way. It feels like I'm a piñata. You know what I mean?
I 100% understand that. I have a lot of friends who play Magic, and they've been playing Magic for many years. And they encourage me to play Magic, but I cannot because I know I will be trounced.
In my opinion, the greatest challenge of any Magic player is ascending to the point where you are happy to help a new player visualize how you view the game. Because you have to let go of the egotism of knowing some secret that presumably no one else knows, or at least the other person at the table doesn't know, which is key to your victory or your whatever. But I find that the most fun I've ever had is where I can kind of walk someone through this little inception moment with the game. It's a good time, but I wish more players were not just more open, because there are lots of players who are open, but players who love to teach in that way in that game.
Yeah, so we just stopped for like a year or two, with the whole time me being like, you guys, we've got to play role-playing games. They're the fucking best. We screwed up with Monkey, and we've got to make a different one. And so we made a different game. And this is all just because we didn't have money. You know what I mean? We couldn't afford core books. So we made another game from scratch, which we dubbed The System. And then we just played that like into our late teens, I think. But I would occasionally play with D&D groups. And there were a lot of parallels because the shape of a role-playing game is natural. Do you know what I mean? Like if you go into it thinking, I'm going to make a role-playing game, like it's not going to be that different.
Yeah, because there's ultimately, I want to do actions, but those actions should have some chance of failure. Yeah. And so you create a failure point, which is either going to be drawing cards or rolling dice or some other randomization engine.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and our system was rough. The way it started was more strict, but later on, we would just go, okay, just write down skills that you think your character might have. I'll read them, and I'll try and incorporate them into the adventure. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I played a Doctor Who RPG that was very jazz, and you basically figured out who your character was, and just made their abilities up off the top of your head.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, for Doctor Who, that is relevant because basically the companions are just like, I have this particular set of skills and I can add that to the stories.
I mean, yeah, for sure. That sounds fun. A Doctor Who RPG would be such a nightmare to run.
True.
It had a very narrow scope. We were in like a compound, and we were in a building, and we were in a room. Yeah. For much of the time.
You would have to run it sci-fi or run it sci-fi or run it for like kids. I tried to run a historical game once. It became clear almost instantly that everyone at the table knew more about the very specific and weird part of history that I'd chosen, which was like the end of the Byzantine Empire. than I knew.
Nice.
And I was like, no one will fucking know about this. I can basically make stuff up. I mean, nobody knows about the end of the Byzantine Empire. Nope. People who play tabletop games do know.
Byzantine Empire, the Roman Empire, these are periods of unique historical importance to wargaming.
Yeah.
A lot of the old school wargaming was Roman cavalry units versus other military units from different armies that never actually got to fight, and like so wargaming was a way to make armies fight that never actually in history got to fight. Yeah. So they have some very specific niches of knowledge in that history.
Oh yeah.
So you were creating this new system and playing every so often with D&D folks, kind of getting your toes in the water there.
Totally, yeah. D&D people did have a totally different, like the system, a lot of the systems were the same and easier to understand in a lot of cases. But D&D people have a different culture. And I played with much more old school guys.
Yeah, was this 3.5?
It was,
or was this...
It was 3.5, but it was a group that certainly started in second ed.
Yeah, second ed people are completely different beasts.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the only D&D players who are like second ed people are fifth ed people.
Yeah,
that's fair. I think that there's definitely a correlation.
I basically made the jump from second ed to fifth ed because it was what was most harmonious with the way that I thought I wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, third was just about having rules for every occasion, and fourth was about having rules for every occasion, but slightly less. But it was way more tactical. And then fifth ed, they kind of relaxed the idea that they could have rules for every occasion, and it feels a lot more like second ed, but it's a lot more codified and user experience oriented than second ed was.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of me, the devil's advocate side of me, that wants to like fourth, you know?
Yeah. I mean, like there were good things in every edition. It's just that it never really got off the ground because of it went down the logical conclusion of where 3.5 was headed. And it took it from role-playing game to game where you role-play.
Yeah.
And that disconnect really, I think, drove a lot of people who had just been hanging on through 3.5. They finally broke away and were like, all right, there's a million other systems in the world. Let's find something. So you got into role-playing fairly early on. You went through a lot of homebrew systems. So what actually made you transition to playing Dungeons and Dragons mostly, or a lot?
So I played a decent amount of it in college because that was just what people were playing.
Sure, which edition was that?
That was third. It was still third.
Okay, 3.5?
No, just third.
The original third, okay.
Yeah, we played third edition. I mean, I played it all the way from sort of the beginning of me playing D&D until fifth came out. Right before fifth, I was playing in a 3.5 group. And it's because I knew fifth edition was coming out. And I could feel that fifth edition was going to become a cultural touchstone, like because they started talking about the DM's Guild and stuff like that. So I got a hold of Elliot, the guy that I mentioned before, and I was like, you know D&D better than me, and you know like the stuff that makes D&D D&D. So run me a super D&D game. Do you know what I mean?
D&D to the max.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about D&D to the max.
I don't know. It's hard to describe. That was
beholders and kobolds and Waterdeep, right? It's like...
totally. It was also a really deadly campaign, but that was also because our group was always deadly. We just didn't care. Like if a character dies, then you're like, okay, well, I'll roll up a new one. Like it's sad. You get attached to them while you're playing them, but also, I mean, it's boring to play the same person week after week after week, especially if there's no danger that they might be taken out. For me,
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a very important point to emphasize.
Do you think that maybe a growing emphasis on backstory and role playing and things like this makes for an environment of less character turnover?
I don't know. I think D&D operates in a sort of trance, right? And there are different elements that are important in order to keep your brain running this imaginary world at 100%. And so definitely there are less dangerous games, and definitely those less dangerous games work for certain people. Mm-hmm. You know, there's no wrong way to play. Like, if everybody has fun, that's awesome, you know. And if people don't have fun, 9 times out of 10, it's because you are mismatched with the group in terms of deadliness, or you need to run a little bit more. You're just a new DM. Like, the first couple games you run might not be the best, right? But but eventually you'll get your sea legs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, yeah, the emphasis on backstory. There's definitely a growing section of the community. I don't know if it's growing either, because I heard so many stories about people quitting groups because their character died. And I was like, I've lost fucking 5 characters in the last 3 months. Like, I don't know. Like, if we quit,
am I a sociopath? Why am I okay with this?
Yeah. But I think that there's probably a segment of the community that really cares about individual characters and has a different sort of approach to narrative risk than a lot of the people who came up on second edition, who just kind of burn through characters and have this sort of built-in anticipation of a character's ultimate demise. Like, they know going in, there's a high likelihood these characters are going to die. I think for some people coming in through more narrative games, then they're going to kind of expect that I created this character, this is the character I'm going to play for this campaign. And so it's just a different expectation. And like you said, it's probably a DM player mismatch. If one person quits because their character died, that's just a DM player mismatch. They're going to go find some other DM who's more interested in the style of game that they're running. And then they will have a long and happy D&D career, playing that one character who's got that super rich narrative. That's what's going to be what's keeping them invested week after week after week, is like the twists and turns in their character's story, as opposed to the constant threat of death and demise.
Yeah. And I think you see some of it play out in some of the big franchise kind of storylines that are being broadcast and consumed as major brands now, which I didn't see anywhere in my kind of radar when I played when I was younger.
Yeah.
When a PC or a beloved NPC dies in those campaigns, people talk about it for years. So it definitely feels like maybe we're in just this little pocket dimension of time. Or maybe it's just a transition. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely possible. But the other thing is that people are learning to play D&D from these franchises. A lot of people are, which is great.
Yeah.
But you can't discount the fact that there's a monetary reason to not kill these characters.
Yeah, you have merchandise,
especially if there's merchandise.
Yeah. Who was it? Scott Kurtz's Binwin, who died on Chris Perkins' game, and Scott Kurtz was like, "But he's my IP." That's really funny.
No, I actually helped. I helped him make that version of Binwin. I was so excited to watch him like play, because I was like, "Yeah, fucking." You're a battle master, because he was gonna go with the champion archetype, which fuck knows, maybe he would have survived if he had.
Yeah.
I went and I was like, nah, dude, you've got to do battle master. It's way more interesting. You've got all kinds of cool abilities. You're not just hitting people with your axe.
You're tripping people and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Because the battle masters can be really cool, especially in a higher level game.
I always run. If my DM allows multi-class, I always run a rogue swashbuckler / battle master for that classic fencing archetype, right?
Oh, that's cool.
So you have been into D&D for a very long time. You played the 3rd edition for years and then switched over to 5th. Where does animation come from for you? Like, where do you start at animation?
I started doing animation because I wanted to go into comics, and then comics died. When I was about 14, maybe 15, the comics just completely
like
shit the
print
bed.
Comics, the big bust in the 90s.
Well, the other thing, but this is a thing that also, I mean, I keep learning over and over, and maybe this is something that'll help other people. But like, I thought after Penny Arcade succeeded and Mega Tokyo and those sorts of webcomics, I was like, oh, the door is closed now. Do you know what I mean? Like they got through and now the door is closed. Webcomics is old.
Yeah, it's like with YouTubing now. It's like, oh, there's so many established YouTubers. Nobody cares about a new YouTube channel now.
Yeah, but then exactly like the same thing happened to me with YouTube. I mean, back when Phil DeFranco got popular initially, when he was doing those, he would have like a like weird tiled background behind him and was like really edgy. I was like, okay, well, it's over. I can't do this. And
is it happening to D&D live play now? That market is super flooded.
Well, I think the thing that Zee's saying though is he was thinking that these doors were closed, but they weren't really.
No,
it was just that self-defeatist kind of attitude that sometimes you get when you see a lot of people who are successful in something. You can kind of talk yourself out of trying.
Totally.
You think it's a zero-sum game, and it's actually not.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. Like there's a bunch of niches out there, and you can survive in those niches.
I mean, the other thing though is that what I didn't take into account is how many people quit. So if you just keep doing it, like you eventually break through. Like I've been animating. I mean, I started animating when Newgrounds was cool, and like I was uploading stuff there, hoping to Christ I might get onto the front page, and never sort of got anywhere. And then so by the time I was about 16, I started homeschooling myself. So I just would read books and do activities on my own, which is a great way to learn. It's also a good way to learn how to learn. But I went to college for animation at like it was like 17.
Wow.
And started living on my own and thought I just thought I was going to be this huge success like right away. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, you have to have confidence in yourself, but sometimes youthful confidence can border on arrogance.
Oh yeah, it does 100%. But I think it accomplishes a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I feel like it has to. I feel like that's very valuable.
Yeah. Arrogance is like can get a lot done. It's crazy.
Yeah, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, you just keep bashing your head against the animating game. You go through college, and then I know you were doing professional work, even while you were doing C-Team stuff like that, like contract work and freelancer and things like that.
Yeah, I was doing Red Bull stuff. At the time, that was my claim to fame at the time. I was like, I am one of the only American illustrators that's sanctioned to be able to do these weird long-nosed Red Bull characters. And actually one of the first jobs that I got when I was animating was working at Kastner and Partners, which are the people who do all of that stuff, right? So they had a few turnovers, right? So every time I would go back to Kastner and Partners, it would be like different people.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
With a few, I mean, there's a few like, old guard there that just like, they'll be there forever, but
started animation as a teenager. You eventually, by bashing your head against it for many years, you eventually start to get the professional work, and that becomes your livelihood. You can move around and travel a lot.
You missed a middle step though, which is that I worked for Machinima for a while.
Oh, Machinima, yeah.
Okay. So Happy Hour for a while was doing shorts every week. So they hired me and one other animator, James Bowman, who's a super cool guy, and he works on BoJack Horseman now as a director. And we would just make a animation every fucking week, and we made these insane animations. I mean, they were so fucking weird. But it was my first sort of like introduction into how YouTube works, how to gain momentum on a social media platform, and how search engine optimization and creativity can overlap, right?
Yeah.
And I did a series for one of their sub channels that did really well, that I did like I basically did everything on. And so then a few years later, one of the guys that I was working with at Machinima got a hold of me for a different thing, which is under a crazy NDA. So I won't even like, all I can say is that it meant that I could stop doing my job, which was in advertainment at the time, making like mobile games and stuff like that, and start moving around because LA is too fucking expensive. And and so we were like, this is going to be awesome. We're going to have more money than we've ever had before. This is going to be the fucking best. And so we moved to Vietnam. And as we were sort of on our way moving to Vietnam, we moved to Pennsylvania for a little bit first, and then we moved to Vietnam. And the whole thing fell through, right?
Yeah.
And then they found a different set of people to take over the project, which I had kind of pitched initially. And so I was going through like this fucking just through the floor depression over it. Because I was just man, they just like, and look, I totally understand why they did it, but they just
you got your hopes up. Like, you got your hopes up. You got excited about a project. I think we've all, I don't think there's anybody on earth who hasn't ever been through a situation where you just got really excited about something and then it was just pulled out from under you. And then that feeling that just like the bottom drops out. It's just awful.
Oh, totally. Well, I signed a predatory contract, right?
Oof. Yeah.
And I knew it was predatory when I signed it. And that was the last predatory contract I ever signed, right? But like, because
you believed in the project.
I believed in the project, and I was like, this is going to be my vehicle or whatever, right? So as I was going through that like hardcore and getting some of the first drafts, you know, for whatever, then C-Team came out, and I saw that it had these like animated characters. And for years, I'd always wanted to animate Acquisitions Incorporated. And then when I saw that the characters were drawn up, I was like, fuck, someone did it.
Yeah.
Someone fucking did it. Shit. And then I found out, oh no, this is just the like sort of animatic style thing that Chris has been doing for the openings. And he did these character designs. And so I was like, these character designs are fucking awesome. I'm going to just animate one of these scenes. And so I animated it, and I tagged everybody who is on the C-Team on Twitter and uploaded the video to Twitter because it didn't have monetization. Because I was scared that they would like give me a community. I don't know.
Yeah, that they might copyright claim you or something like that. It's a reasonable thing to be afraid of. Penny Arcade's pretty protective of their IP.
Well, I mean, there's, you know what, though, compared to a lot of companies, I find them surprisingly chill.
Yeah, I mean, they're generally willing to work with you, but at the same time, you wouldn't want to monetize something without permission.
Oh, definitely not.
Totally understandable. And like, that's where I think all of us first interact with you. Those animations were like the rallying cry for the community to form around.
Oh, really?
I want to say. Yeah, I feel like having those animations to talk about and having that there, I think it legitimized the community. Like, look at the art that's coming out of this community. This is a real community. We have something amazing that's coming out of, that's not even from the show, that people are making just because they're passionate about the show. I feel like everybody just talking about those and the weekly releases of them early on, that was a lot of what got people kind of like watching the show was one thing, and then Zee's animations was the next thing that got people like fired up every week and made people so excited. Early on. So I mean, like, I remember watching those and just they were. I mean, the comedic timing was great. The conversion from the show to animated form and like all the little jokes you'd sneak into the animation were super funny. And it was just a.
Thank you.
It was way too much effort for anybody to spend every week, and we were just blown away that this thing was even happening, that this was real.
Most of the scenes that I remember from season 1 are the scenes that I remember the best are the ones that you animated.
Yeah, exactly.
To be fair, though, that's also partially because they would play those before and during every stream.
So our minds were slowly washed clean of anything
but on
else.
Hyper RPG, it was either one or two. Yeah, it was either one or two that would get played.
The Jeebus one, over and over.
Yes, and the Jeebus one. And I'm like, there are many, many other ones for which you could choose to play. But yeah, like even the one that comes to mind is the Orb of Thunder.
The
like,
Orb of Thunder.
Oh yeah,
just freaking amazing. 1-inch Orb of Thunder.
I think the one that I always think about is the gruesome murder in the
Sweezeling. Oh, I love them all.
Oh yeah.
Okay, Jay, sorry.
Yeah,
no.
Thank you. I mean, I worked very hard on them. But I also recognized immediately that they struck a chord with people. And so I was like, I'm doing something that's working. I really shouldn't stop. And then that immediately after the first one, Chris reached out and then Ryan to ask if I could help with recaps.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to do these sort of like big season recaps.
Yeah, because the biggest barrier to entry into a D&D show is that long archive you have to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's unfortunate, though. I think... Anyway, yeah. So, but they reached out and then eventually... What did they do? Yeah, they asked me if I could do some recaps. And so we started working on it. And I was so excited to be working with Penny Arcade that I think I started to go a little overboard with with like a lot of the different stuff in it. And so I started falling behind on my weekly stuff. And I don't know, it just at some point it just started to kind of evaporate, right?
I went through a very similar thing, kind of. I mean, obviously not on the same scale. You were doing a tremendous amount of work, but I was doing a lot of community center organization stuff, and I was doing, running stats and totals and things like that. And I think at a certain point, you just realize like you're pouring so much of your own time and resources into something that you're not getting like an equal return out of, and it's just like. You have to have these things in healthy moderation, right? You have to give an amount of yourself that you're okay giving away.
Sure. I mean, I listen, I do agree with that. I think in this case, well, firstly, one of the things in our agreement for doing the recaps and for them running the stuff on the Twitch channel was like, I basically asked them if I could put all of the shorts on my channel, which finally grew my YouTube audience from, I think I had 30,000 or something at the beginning, but it grew it up to like, not even 30. I had like 7. And that grew it up to about 30,000. And then I did the first animated spellbook and it crushed the views on the animated shorts. And I was like, what's happening? Like this is a thing that is established. It's related to Penny Arcade. It's related to, you know what I mean? Acquisitions Incorporated. Yeah. It's like, it's got a built-in huge hardcore audience. And then I just did this other thing, I don't know, as an experiment. And it blew up.
I think the animated spellbook has like that kind of universal appeal to D&D players, whereas Ac Inc. is kind of, you have to watch the show to get the clip, right? So it kind of narrows your audience right there.
Totally. You know what? I forgot to mention something, which is, you know how I mentioned that I was in a really predatory contract? And so I got another contract for some freelance, which was super, super predatory. And I could tell it was, but it was for a huge company. And so I reached out, I complained about it, and I added Corey Cassoni. Corey Cassoni is Scott Kurtz's business manager. He is the guy. Have you ever heard Surviving Creativity?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so he's the guy on that, right? Who kind of like sets the pace and all that stuff. And I was talking to him about and he sort of like looked over the contract for me. And then he started like he would just give me help for just because he was like a really cool guy. And so as I was talking to him, he said something offhand, and it wasn't meant to be a piece of advice or anything like that. But he was like, oh, well, you don't have to worry about this will claim your IP potentially, but you don't have to worry about your IP because you don't make anything. Like, you're just using other people's IPs, so don't worry about it. And I remember that struck me so deeply because I was like, I am a creator. What do you mean? And then I looked at my catalog and I was like, I fucking am not. I need to make something. And so
you got to invest in your own brand.
Totally. And so 2 or 3 weeks later, the first animated spellbook came out. I didn't expect it to succeed at all, though. I thought it was just going to be failed experiment.
Well, that's crazy because it's really, really good.
I think you go into a lot of really good depth and description and demonstration. Like there's a lot of meat in those that I think, I don't know, it's those animations have their hooks in me pretty deep, so I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks.
We could deconstruct my addiction later and understand what the key keywords or compositions were that got me so hooked.
Oh yeah, well thank you.
I think what's really interesting about the animated spell book, the way that it like takes a single spell and just drills down and focuses on that spell or that rule or that ability and just focuses on that through the length of the episode, is it's a tool that gets people inspired to play. And I think that that's really useful if you're trying to get people into the game. It's not just explaining a rule to somebody.
Yeah.
It's making them want to play the game.
Yeah.
And that's what's really cool about that series.
Well, thank you.
I think that the examples that you give from actual games and places that you've used these spells before to great effect or not great effect are really what's interesting to me about it.
Yeah, and the style of play that also comes out in the background of that more like death-friendly D&D.
Yeah.
You can tangentially experience that style of play that you maybe have never encountered personally through these narratives.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that our games are an incredibly dark comedy of errors.
Fair.
Yeah.
I mean, animated spellbook is the ultimate expression of kind of what you're already doing anyway, which is playing tabletop RPGs and then animating as a career. It's a mix of those two passions for you. What's it like to kind of realize that something you're making is finally sort of pierced into the greater zeitgeist? What was the first indication to you that you actually had succeeded with this thing versus some of your previous attempts?
Okay, so the first slight indication was that I was getting better numbers immediately with the animated spellbook episodes. And I would release them back to back.
Yeah, you were on a pretty intense schedule there at first.
Well, I was still releasing some C-Team stuff, and I would try and release them back to back so that maybe I could piggyback the animated spellbook on some views just to give it some traction. Yeah,
because you were still worried at that point that the animated spellbook was going to do worse than your C-Team stuff.
Oh, for sure,
when it went completely the opposite.
Well, I think the hard thing about the C-Team and about a lot of D&D podcasts is like they're too long. Like nobody can keep up. It's really, it sucks, but it's like if the C-Team had an arc that lasted 2 seasons and then resolved, and then they just started a new game, which is what most D&D groups do. I mean, most D&D groups don't go for years. They go for like about 8 months, and then you've resolved whatever the plot is. You know what I mean? And then you're like, okay, well, let's play modern or something like, or like let's go to some specific, like get into Curse of Strahd with some new characters or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I sprung a green dragon on my old party. They decided to fight it and wiped, and now we're doing a game in New York.
Exactly.
This stuff just happens. You change things up, you mix things up, you remix it. And I think the Adventure Zone actually does that, where they went for a year and a half, 2 years, the 69 episodes, and then they cut it off and they started a new Adventure Zone, which I think is a really, like, it's genius in its simplicity.
Totally, yeah. I mean, for me, it's like I would absolutely watch 11 episodes or something. But there's something about the way that the internet works and the way that views work and the way that like advertising business models and stuff work, that they screw up a lot of ideas, like a lot of really good ideas, right? Because when something's working like that, where it's a story thing, it's better if it can just wrap up in a way.
Yeah, not every stream can be Critical Role going 5 hours a week for 100 episodes and retaining a 30,000 viewer audience.
That's true, but
I don't think anything else can be Critical Role.
No, well, I don't think anything could be Critical Role necessarily, but even towards the end of their first run, that audience was thinning out a bit. You know what I mean? Like they got a really nice pulse when they restarted the new new
campaign 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard. 5 hours. Who has 5 hours a week?
Exactly.
I certainly don't. I was just going to say, one of the challenges I have is, for me, so much of the enjoyment comes out of the interplay between the people playing the characters and the interplay between the characters that happens spontaneously as events unfold and as the story unravels in a spontaneous way, because it's not a scripted show. Yeah. So you can't shortcut the setting the table to create those moments. But at the same time, you can't, like, there's the balance of time doesn't allow you to adopt all the shows that you'd like to adopt. So you have to find some sort of a workaround, because it is a real constraint.
Yeah. I think the heavily edited format of the Adventure Zone is probably the future of streamed D&D.
Yeah. Well, I don't understand why, but this is also just related to, for some reason, Penny Arcade just cannot get traction on YouTube. I don't understand it. They make really good stuff, but like,
yeah, it's weird.
They can't get the traction that they deserve, I feel like. Like I'm not saying they'd still get amazing view counts. Like, if you're a starting creator, like, you would never be able to hope to, do you know what I mean? Like, immediately jettison to the view counts they get. Mm-hmm. The Acquisitions game that they did, where they did a really produced one, that for me is the vision of a perfect campaign show. They did that beautiful limited run that had that insane opening by Chris. It looked like something out of a fucking Thundercats cartoon. Mm-hmm. That's what I would have loved to get 3 seasons like that. Mm-hmm. You know, where it's like, it's maybe 5 episodes. It's one really contained adventure. So I do think that with some forethought, you can set the table. I think it's possible. Right?
Yeah, I think the Adventure Zone's heavily edited format, 1 hour episodes released bi-weekly, is a pretty solid format for podcast style games.
Yeah.
Removing all the dice rolls, removing all the, unnecessary chatter, just leaving the really funny interactions and then the role play. I think that's a very good format. I always say that that's the future of D&D, but you don't really see a lot of shows taking that lead, because it's a lot of work to edit an hour-long podcast. It's a ton of work to go through and make that sound listenable.
I don't know. Maybe the other key would be to make stuff that people can jump into, right? Like, do you guys listen to Welcome to the Magic Tavern at all? Or Hello from the Magic Tavern?
I have listened to a few episodes, and I know what you're onto there.
It's so great. Like, you could listen to any episode and you would know what was going on almost immediately. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're kind of like self-contained mini narratives.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, I think that we have basically talked about the arc that you've done here.
Sure.
But is there anything that you're working on right now that you haven't released yet that you want to talk about, or is there anything like you're excited about?
Yeah. So recently I've decided to switch over to I have actually been pretty disciplined about never openly telling people when my episodes release.
Yeah.
Because I'm too scared to trap myself in it.
Right. Because if you set a deadline, then you've got to meet that deadline, or else you lied about that deadline.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm going to say that I've come up with a strategy as opposed to a release schedule. But the strategy is to spend a little more time on every other episode. Because it's like that thing. I initially had a bunch of ideas that were bursting at the seams and needed to get out. And those were the ideas that, like, they're just the things you talk to people about when you talk about D&D. And I'm transitioning now over to, like, actually having to think about stuff. You know what I mean? And I don't want to get to that bad point that I can see some people can get to, where they're just like, I have to make something, I don't know. And then just...
Right, yeah.
Like, occasionally you do have to release something like that, because, you need to fail occasionally. Like, and it's better to just accept it and finish the project and then move on to the next week than it is to, like, torture yourself over it for a really long period of time. But the most recent episode that I released the second to most recent episode that I released was the episode about goblins getting a deck of many things.
That one was so good. Winding and weaving through the streets, the little animations of them like maneuvering around. I thought that was such a succinct way to indicate this sort of city-run adventure.
Thank you. So that did well, but I think it also did well because every time I started grinding on it and going really hard, something bad would happen. And then I would have to stop animating for a little while. And then I would be like, okay, well, like, or good. A few really good things happened too. Like we had a huge family reunion and it just felt weird to be in the other room animating while my family that I haven't seen in 14 years, is in the other room. So, but I ended up really taking some time and thinking about the episode and spending a little more time with it. And it came out better. But it's a scary risk to take more time on stuff because if it tanks, that's your month's income. It's gone.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's a big pendulum to swing.
Exactly. Because all you have to do now with, the terms of service is say something like the Crow conspiracy, name it that. And then it'll get flagged as a conspiracy theory channel. And then they'll stop recommending you in other people's feeds because of the terms of service. But you're actually talking about rat people in Waterdeep,
Yeah. You're talking about those like auto flags that they have now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that you kind of have a history of like wanting to mix things up in your videos anyway. I mean, you did that one great Casey Neistat parody.
Oh, yeah.
Which was like really different from your usual style. And you could tell like you put a lot of effort into animating that one because it was like there was a lot of different kind of POV shots and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was that and one other episode are like my favorite episodes. And they just can't get traction. It's like I loved making that episode, and I was like, this episode's gonna blow the fuck up, man. It's so good, And then you
just need the Casey Neistat retweet, man.
Well, even that wouldn't have done anything for me. It might have. I don't know. I was like, fuck, this looks good. It's got a nice vibe to it. I animated a lot of it at a higher frame rate than I usually animate stuff at. And I was like, this is the best. But you never know what's going to connect with people.
Well, maybe it's a balm to you that I remember that episode.
It absolutely is, yeah. That one and the nostalgia one are the two that I'm like, why didn't those get any...
The algorithm,
I have to say, like, even those did way better than anything... than I expected anything to do at the beginning of last year. Do you know what I mean? So like you get spoiled so quick. Tina Fey had something about how like you in her autobiography, how like people adjust to luxury faster than anything else.
Oh man, I love Tina Fey's
Bossy Pants.
Yeah, Bossy Pants.
Boss Pants or Bossy Pants?
Bossy Pants.
Bossy Pants, yeah. I just heard Boss Pants and I was like, that seems right, and repeated it.
The last thing I would want to ask you is where can people find your stuff and where can people follow you?
Just search for Zee Bashew or the animated spellbook on a search engine, and I'll probably I've got a weird name and I do a weird thing, so I'll show up.
Yeah. We'll definitely link you as well.
Yeah.
All right. And with that, I think that we are at the end of another episode of Insight Check.
Thank you. I just keep
thanking you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zee.
Listen, we can't say this enough. We are all huge fans of what you've been doing. And I don't think I've ever been so excited to see somebody find success. I'm just like... Because you were spending so much effort on the C-Team stuff, and I'm just like, this guy can do his own thing, and then you did your own thing, and it was amazing.
It was weird succeeding at first, though. It's a weird thing that people don't really talk about. Like,
it probably feels really fake. Like
it is, and it's a weird thing. I've talked to other people about it who've had it happen, and it's not universal, but for a lot of people, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Because you're just like, what the fuck is happening?
Well, it comes out of nowhere, so it can go out of nowhere, right?
Yeah. No, 100%.
Did it sometimes feel like the volume knob is turned up way too high and you don't know how it happened and you don't know how to control it?
100%, yeah. But I didn't realize that was what was causing it. It was like in other stuff.
Yeah.
Come to Insight Check for increasingly esoteric metaphors of success.
Yeah.
That's our new niche.
Yeah, for sure.
Is it like when you're swimming and you suddenly emerge into an ocean from a river and you don't know which direction you need to go?
Yeah.
No, that's the esotericness that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
All right. With that, I'm going to wrap us up.
Okay.
This is Insight Check. We do a weekly show. You can follow us at Insight Check Pod.
Help us blow up. We want to blow up. We want that terrifying success.
Yeah.
No.
I don't know, yeah. Be careful what you wish for.
I'm okay. Here.
I don't want the terror.
Well, that passes.
Okay, that's good.
Our intro is by Vinswept, and it is Never Stand Alone. Our art is by Amy T. Falcone, who is the greatest person I know. And see you next time.
Answering your cues from our collective A's.
This was
Insight
Check.
Yep.
You always goof me up.
We've gotten worse at that, definitely.
It's fine. In editing, I fix it. All things disappear in editing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's true. Especially dick jokes and or sex jokes.
Oh, yeah.
Or butt jokes.
Do they?
Yeah, they just vanish.
Oh, that makes...
We should replace all those things with esoteric metaphors. That could be our brand.